Firstly, I've been pretty interested in the concept of being the only child and how only children they develop differently. I've been interested in the developmental psychology, I guess, and I feel like only children have character traits like maybe they're more sort of attention seeking, maybe they less socialized, maybe they they compete more for validation because they're the sort of focus of their parents. I think there's a lot of different variables that come with it. And think of that and then I compare it to having siblings. So I thought I'd start by like if you had any thoughts about this, I mean it sounds like a maybe a bigger statement, but do only children develop worse than people with siblings?
Yeah, it's an interesting area, I think, and I guess I do have some thoughts about it because I have a number of like half siblings, right, where one parent had previous children with another partner, and my other parent had a previous child with like um another guy, and um my sister like genetically is a half sister, but I lived with her growing up, so she feels like a she is my sister. Do you know what I mean? We don't really give a shit about that half when it comes to genetics. Um, but I've always said because of our age gap, I'm kind of spiritually an only child, I guess, because me and my sister have an 8 year age gap, right? And I think maybe there's a gender like factor in this as well. We were interested in different things, so it's like the age gap plus the gender difference just meant we didn't really hang out. Like maybe we'd talk at meal times and we talk about school or whatever, and we still chat now when I see her and stuff. But like those like play years, let's say, when I was like 4, she was 12, 13, and was like at secondary school and was dealing with that and had different friends and were just like there's different worlds. So always remember as a kid when I was at my mum's place, like where I was most of the time, I was playing by myself. Um, and I think that has molded the way that I am now. I mean, this is anecdotal data and we're just playing around with ideas. There's nothing really sort of objective about this, but maybe that's why I'm so interested in like thinking deeply and stuff. And I find things so fascinating, or I, I'm good at just being alone with ideas and writing and reading and working on my sort of cognitive intellectual stuff, because as a kid I did have to do that. Like I remember playing with little Lego characters and making little voices for them and imagining battles and imagining confrontations and all this, but all of that is just me and my toys. um so to come back to what you said about like is one better or worse, I think like most things it's not black and white, it's many shades of gray. Are only children more lonely? I don't know the evidence on that, but just to make a gut assumption, I'd say probably yes. Um, but do they have less, I don't know, conflict at home between siblings? Maybe. Are they more introverted? Maybe. Are they better at working independently when they get older? Maybe. Now, I don't know any of the research on this. I'd be interested into looking into it, or if anyone has any thoughts in the comments or can contact us to talk about it, I'd be interested. But I think there are pros and cons to both sides, I guess is what I'm saying. Because then the only child, maybe there's a higher probability of being spoiled, right? They understand principles of sharing later in life, or less saliently. So yeah, what do you think? Well, I'll finish there and see your thoughts, and we'll go from there.
I think an overview is that I think when you have a sibling, you have someone to reflect things off because I don't think you can do that as much to your parents, or maybe you can, but it's not the same. I think there are, I think you touched on something interesting that there are actually maybe benefits of being an only child, which I didn't think of before. Maybe they're going to be more creative because they spend longer staring at walls and not having that play. So they're in that isolation, they deal with it and they have those attributes. Although I do think generally, if I didn't have any siblings, I feel like I would be just less like aware of the world. It's like if I was with a brother, if I had a brother, then I would probably be more masculine, and I'd be hyper in tune with the male mind, and I wouldn't understand the female mind as much. And now that I have a sister, so I feel like to a degree I am a little bit in tune with the female mind, and obviously you got the mirror, I got a mother as well, so I think those kind of energies, having that other person around, gives you an insight into the experience of the opposite gender.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I do feel like because like I grew up um with just a sister and a mum, single mum, I am way more like in touch with my emotions than let's say the average 21-year-old guy. And I'm actually quite feminine in that way. Like I want to talk about feelings as soon as I experience them because I know that that's my route of dealing with things. Like I can't just bottle things up like a lot of like lads tend to do. And just to touch on that hypothetical you just posed there, I think that's a really good point, right? If me or you had an older brother, let's say 3 years older. I know I do. I kind of have those my two half brothers, but I don't really see them loads and didn't see them loads as a teenager. But let's say I had a brother that was 2 years older than me. We both did, okay? That would have a huge impact because you'd be coming up into the world, and let's say when you're 6, they're 8. When you're 10, they're 12. When you're 14, they're 16. They're always like 2 steps ahead of you in life. And so you're always going to be comparing yourself to them. And there's going to be this natural competition, like masculine social hierarchy thing going on, which will like impact you. Because I know I've got friends who I think there's two sides to it. One is like they feel like they're always in competition with their brother. And it's like, when their brother does one thing, they have to do it as well or more and add to it and add to it. But the other side of it is I know friends who have older brothers and those older brothers act as like a safety for them. So they go to school, for example, and they know, oh, you're that person's brother from 2 years above, or if that brother can be like a backup, let's say, just in life, just a little guardian, a little protector type vibe. So I think it's complicated, and I think it depends on the dynamic, and I think it depends on the parenting style and the emotional environment of the household. All these things contribute together, but
Mm.
I don't think there's any circumstance that's like worse. I think it's about how you manage it. Whether you're an only child or you're one of 5 siblings or one of 7 or one of 2 or you're the same gender as your sibling or you're different. It just yeah, it's just it's case by case, I guess.
Yeah, I I would agree that obviously it's the whole how the family deal with it all together, but I think there's just something in it that I just feel like more only children don't end up maybe as like as complete maybe. I
Socially,
think
they'd struggle.
I think you can tell when someone's an only child. And then I have thoughts like, well, is it immoral to just have one child? Because I would never want that really for myself. I just I feel like they'd have a lot more trouble being complete, and therefore they would need something to fill those incompletions because they're just less rounded human being for the general part.
Do you think that I give off only child energy?
No, I don't think so. I think you're more complete. Like,
I think
it doesn't come to mind.
I think I think the only large thing missing will be the immediate like social everyday stimulation of having a close sibling. Um but that you can always find things that fill that hole. If the kid's
Yeah.
really social at school, or they're seeing their friends from school every evening, or they do loads of clubs and stuff, and they're just active in the community, I feel like you might be okay. But I also think there are things there's understanding what you want as an individual is made perhaps easier as an only child, right? Because you don't have the constant like um comparison with your sibling all the time. You are just you. You are just as you are in the world, and maybe yeah, you're influenced by your parents like everyone and society and media narratives, etc., but there isn't that like your brother's 2 years older than you and he by this age he was doing this. Like it's just like you can
Mhm.
find your own way maybe a little bit easier. I don't know, these are interesting discussions. And on the morality of having one child, sometimes it's not not in your control. Sometimes there's fertility issues. Sometimes you try and it doesn't. Sometimes you have your first kid too old, and then it's difficult from that point. Sometimes one is enough for some parents. Like it's I think my overall like argument would be that everything outside of it is what outside of that particular circumstance is what determines the quality. Like
Mhm.
how the emotional environment, the attachment style of that child, however they're socialized or not through whatever means, they're the things that really move the needle in terms of their development.
I think you make a very good point in that. That's what I'd say for you. You found things to fill that the only child hole. That's what I think I'd say for you. And I also it just thought of a question. When you said like only children are maybe more spoiled and stuff, where do you what do you think about like the concept of spoiling your kids? For me, I feel like there's maybe I lean towards it being okay to spoil, especially if you have girls. But I don't like the idea of spoiling if I have boys, and maybe that's just the way I kind of perceive how uh different sort of genders should be raised. But that's sort of what comes to mind for me.
Well, I'm interested to dig into that a little bit because I think a spoiled version of either like gender child is terrible. Um, but I think generally it's dangerous because children need to understand what no means. And when they request anything and the answer is always yes, of course, yes, of course, yes, of course, yes, of course, then when they go out into the world and they get slapped with a no, someone rejects them, they don't get the job they wanted, they don't pass the exam they needed to pass, or just something just happens and it just the world hits them and says no. How are they going to like deal with that? They're not. They're going to blame the world. They're going to be entitled. It's terrible. Like the worst thing you can possibly do as a parent is spoil your kids. I really think. In
Mm,
fact, if you, it's almost like I've had these thoughts before. If you try and make your kids' upbringing as comfortable as possible to avoid traumatizing them, that in itself is a form of like messing them up because they're in this cushy like sunshine and rainbow world, and when they go out into the world and have to carve their own path, then they're just like swayed by all the storms. They can't weather the storms of life, so you don't set them up properly. So I think it's very dangerous. But tell me what you think. Why is it different for boys and girls, and why is it not that deep for you?
I don't know if I'd want to promote as much difficulty for like if I had a girl like because I think this is maybe I get a tiny bit on my dad from my dad because he likes the idea of making sort of my sister happy, and you know she needs to enjoy her 16th birthday, and he's quite like relaxed on her. She doesn't need to get a job straight away, and I do feel I see that kind of opinion because I feel like I'd want to give uh if I had a daughter, like give her a more fun leading sort of childhood.
And why
Um,
not boy?
because I feel like I don't think masculine life is supposed to be fun.
Oh,
Uh, well, I think it's a nice byproduct, but I think we get bored of fun you're a child if you're a son and all you know is fun. You get to 25 and you kind of haven't got that development to then be able to look back and be like, I built myself up and now I can provide for a family. You don't have that. But obviously, I have more traditional ways of thinking about these sort of things,
mm,
and I understand that. But and I feel like yeah, I think it's just my traditional views to be honest.
mm.
But I think there's so much fulfillment that us as men get it and becoming more self-developed, and maybe women should experience that too. But it's but I think more so on men. It, I think it's just the way that I've been looking at things.
Yeah. I can move more to the side of agreeing with you if we change the term men and women and make it masculinity and femininity, and then take like the idea of a human female and a human male out of it. And to me, it's about like universal energies, and it gets more abstract. And maybe
Mm.
yeah, a masculine way of being is more delay gratification, um, like personal development, in terms of like the male, like what defines a male in nature, right? It's the one
Yeah,
that competes for the female. Now this is taking human ideas out of it, or any specific animal species. Males or masculine, the masculine side of the species, generally speaking, competes to earn the femininity in the species. So maybe that's why we feel that way, that you need to go through the battles and trials and tribulations of rising up the social hierarchy to then mate meet a partner and mate and reproduce, etc., etc. And maybe I understand where your views come from. Even evolutionarily, I understand it. I just think it's very nuanced, because you can have girls that strive way more than like some guy that's just like a soppy geezer that doesn't really want to do much. Like there's just you're right in like unspecified terms. Um,
yeah. I think I'm happy to agree with you there because it kind of removes a generalization, which
yeah,
things are very good.
because
And
I think masculine and feminine are not tied to male female. Like
it's
like like the way of being and the biological state are two different things. Generally speaking, the biological like set of set of body parts and all that, generally speaking, align with the energy, but that's not always the case, and I think they're bigger than just like any particular species. They're in the same way that I see culture as masculine and nature as feminine. You know what I mean?
isn't that what David Data writes about?
Mm. Yeah, exactly that. They're ways of being, and we're attracted to the polar, they're opposite ways of being, I guess, and and that polarity is why we're attracted to one another, and that polarity creates tension and energy and force, and that's like why we get attracted to people and why we like love each other, and why they're all part of like ultimately a big whole, which I do agree with. Like, I know you said before, the way you see it is that the human being was one, and then we disobeyed God at some point in history or some point in our spiritual past, and then we were severed and cut in half, and we have to find one another again. I like that as a narrative. Whether that's necessarily true or not, to me, is less relevant. I like the ethos of that.
I'm gonna add something. I remember you saying, I think when I saw you a couple of weeks ago, that the more dominant the woman is in the relationship, the less the male, the more that the male testosterone decreases.
Yeah.
And could that be argued that like the kind of more masculine, more feminine the guy is, the less the difference in their testosterone levels, and so maybe it's like a big part of just like the way shit is nowadays. And also, can you expand on that? Like, how does that actually work with testosterone? Like, if, how does it trigger that?
Well, we're going into some areas that I don't quite understand, but I just find interesting. So, like the same thing, the same thing happens with like your position in the social hierarchy generally, right? And that the great thing about being a human being is our social hierarchy isn't like stags who fight with their antlers, right, to compete for mates. We're not that primitive anymore. We can do things like earn money or show character or have social status or use humor or whatever to gain in the social hierarchy. We can get really good in a very specific domain, whether it's like business or art or wheelchair basketball, whatever the fuck you want to choose, right? You can get good at a thing. And as you rise up that hierarchy, your testosterone will increase. And I think it's about the the dynamic that causes a testosterone decrease of like the male is more submissive in the relationship. Now, obviously, I'm not like a relationship expert. And I'd be interested, Jacob, if we can get a guest on to talk about this kind of thing because it is interesting. Like even stats like if the wife is the main breadwinner, so she brings back the most money to the household, the probability of divorce is like massively higher. And we even found out last week in a lecture. Now, I'm not saying I agree with this stat. I'm just saying it's interesting. There was a result in the 1980s that found um, the more educated a man's wife was, the more likely he was to have coronary heart disease. Like weird stuff like that. Weird stuff. And I'm not saying it's weird, bro. And you could definitely argue that that's like 1980s sexist, like misogynist, like research. 100%. I would agree with that bandwagon to a large degree. But it's an interesting conversation, isn't it? Um, yeah. What was your original question? Tell me a bit more about where I got that from.
I was just thinking of testosterone as maybe like a different point of view to your kind of like masculine. Does that link to the masculine and feminine energy, like of a guy? Like, because if they were to have less testosterone, would they be kind of more feminine?
Yeah. What comes first? The levels of testosterone or the extent that you have masculine energy? It's like a chicken or the egg situation. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think what I would say is the guy that's the most masculine guy has the most testosterone. Less masculine guy will have less testosterone. Whichever comes first in that situation, I'm not ultimately sure. I know, like, we gain testosterone from weird, like, kind of abstract things like winning. Winning raises your testosterone. Talking to females raises your testosterone. Um, competing with other, like, competing with other teammates or challengers or whatever increases our testosterone. If you lose, it decreases it. It's like it is very, very connected to social hierarchy dynamics and complicated stuff like that, which is just it's cautious to get into in the modern day with how things are. And like you say something, you'll get shamed for it. Like I'm very careful in how I talk about this. It's so great, it's so nuanced.
No, don't be. Is I did this like massive like interesting round of like what is doing well at the moment online in our niche, in the podcasting kind of niche. And the thing that came up the most was male versus female, transgender, politics, and the kind of everything in between with like the the things that like putting two basically like against each other, or like how different rates decrease this thing, and that is what's really popping off at the moment. And I think it makes sense because obviously everyone can relate to it, and everyone knows men and female is like one of the biggest things in the world.
Mm.
But what we're getting, so I know this shit's gonna get views if I do post it, but what I think we're getting to something that I'm trying to think about. It's almost like something external happens, and that thing, then however we respond to it, so whether that's like a partner with different attributes, whether that's winning in a sport, or whether that's I even saw that you mentioned like a long time ago about how the amount of time a guy spends on Instagram, the lower his testosterone was.
Mm.
Now
And
that's
that was justified because or that was elaborated by saying that when you're on Instagram, what are you seeing? Most of the time, you're seeing people that are higher than you in the social hierarchy, whether it's the guy that's like traveling and lives a nomadic lifestyle and makes money online with the nice car or the nice girlfriend or the nice clothes or whatever, like or it's you just see people doing cool shit, whether it's someone doing a crazy snowboarding trick or like Cristiano Ronaldo like goal compilation or whatever. You're seeing people doing cool shit because cool shit is what trends. Cool shit is what catches eyeballs. But when you're scrolling Instagram, you're seeing all this cool shit and all you're doing is sitting in your bed. Like there's this rift. You will, even if it's subconsciously, compare yourself to that person in this little short clip or whatever. Compare yourself to where they are in the social hierarchy, and your testosterone will likely respond to that. I'm not an expert. I don't really know what I'm talking about, but it makes sense in my head. It makes sense. And that's why, Jake, I don't have Instagram. I don't have social media. And I really think it's a dangerous thing because even people I know, even people I'm friends with, and I'm good acquaintances with, if I saw their daily life all the time, I would constantly compare myself to it. Constantly. Even though I seem like quite a like guy who's worked on himself and has himself put together, I definitely would. So You have to be wary about that shit. You are, you know, like Peterson said, you're not very different from the lobster experiencing serotonin changes when it wins or loses fights. And the fights these days, we're not like stags fighting with our antlers. We're socially competing, and it's very unconscious. It's very informal. It's very covert, but I think it still happens.
The bit that I'm trying to figure out though is, say I knock someone out in a boxing ring. How does that feeling of winning trigger my ego and then lead to more hormones of testosterone?
Mm.
What's that kind of chain of command happening there? Like, how does it get from I've something happens external, it then gives me a big neurological feeling, and then that somehow changes my hormones?
Yeah. No, well, it's one of those, Jake, where, and I don't say this very often, I say it less than I should. I'm not sure. But it's a really good question. It's a really, really good question. Why is it when I throw a basketball into a small space, a little net, and it swishes, and why do I feel like the guy after I do that? I don't know. I need, like, it's a good question. What's going on biologically? When I see that happen, how does my brain within a split second perceive like I've hit the target? Now, I remember Peterson a while ago talking about this. Why people go to sports games? Why do people queue up for hours and hours and hours, stand in queues, pay money for season tickets or whatever to watch a 90-minute football game that may end 1-0, right? But that one goal, everyone in the team's fans of the goal scorer, everyone erupts in applause. There's standing ovations, there's singing, there's clapping, there's screaming, and we love it. We're captivated by it, especially if it's a good, like, well, like beautiful goal, a good, a one that required great skill and mastery. We love seeing human beings hit the target. So maybe that's part of it. You're a boxer in a boxing ring. The target of that situation, the thing your ego is focused on, is knocking out that other person, or at least gaining enough points during the rounds that you are the winner. And so when you hit that target, you perceive that win, and that gives you the rush of endorphins, the rush of, you know, raised testosterone. I'm playing with ideas here, but if anyone knows, get in touch, and I might, yeah, maybe we should research this. It makes
But
sense, though.
that's interesting as well, though, because it kind of not only Anthony Joshua, when he knocks someone out, increases the testosterone rise, but the people that are watching Anthony Joshua also
Yes,
get a
yes.
testosterone rise.
There is data. There is data on that. A winning team, when they watch whatever sport it is, they will experience a testosterone boost if their team wins. But think about it this way, Jake. I think generally speaking, human beings love observing mastery. So, like on my birthday celebration, when you came over and we had the violinist in the living room, it was quite awkward, right? But what we enjoyed about it was seeing somebody display mastery. And that's like, she's like, she was hitting the target in a perfect way. The notes flowed together stupendously. It was like, we were seeing something happen. Like, it was almost a religious experience. Same thing when you see like Cristiano Ronaldo hit a crazy free kick, or watch Steph Curry hit a deep three. It's like, there's something to it. And if you're that person doing it, of course you can have higher testosterone. It just
Mm.
makes sense.
But like, yeah, I know you're kind of like enjoying the music and you're enjoying watching the boxer, but like, why watching it would you get anything like sort of hormonally from it? Why would you feel that rush? I know we want to see mastery, but why would that then translate to us feeling like really good? Like, uh, uh, because like you're not, no, you're not the one that's doing it.
No.
You're just watching the game,
But
and
I think it's a good question. I think we're very tribal. We still have primitive man's brain, right? Um, and I think if your ego is identified with that person or that team, let's say you're an Arsenal fan and you watch Arsenal beat Manchester United with a winning goal in the 90th minute, because you identify as an Arsenal fan, so that's part of your ego, part of your identity in the world, part of your sense of self. When you see your team win, then that part of you is like validated. Does that make sense?
mm, I guess it rubs off on our identity because we are caught up in whatever team, so it
Yeah.
would still get some kind of feeling because we hold it so significant and it's a part of our identity.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Another question. So we spoke again about a couple of weeks ago about how men don't care what status level of women they date, but women want to date up or across. Can you give me a bit more context on why you think that is?
Yeah, so this is obviously like I learned this stuff like from I don't know, like modern wisdom like podcast episodes with like evolutionary psychologists, I guess. And you know, evolutionary psychology is so controversial. And I see what you're doing here, Jake. You're trying to get things out of me that are going to do well online. I see what's going on there. Know your games. But yeah, if you think about it, right? Imagine, I don't know, like thousands of years ago, we still have the same principles, really, psychologically, as our ancestors. If you're um, looking to date somebody, well, you're looking to have offspring, right? As a female, you want to choose the best possible partner you can. Okay, so you want to pick a male in the tribe that is at least as competent, or ideally more competent in life than you are, because that means that you're going to get very, very high quality genes for your offspring, right? That's less relevant for a male, I guess, because I guess what we're looking for is evolutionary speaking, not talking about me and you or any specific guy, evolutionarily speaking, we're looking for youth and fertility because youth and fertility is an indicator of good genes. It all comes down to like genetic stuff and evolutionary psychology and all that. Do I think it really plays out in the real world? Maybe, maybe. I think it does. Now I don't know the exact statistics on that, but you know, even the fact. Now this is a scary stat. This is not me saying this. This is like crazy research that the higher a female is in IQ, the lower chance she has of getting married. And the converse is the case for men. The higher the IQ of a man, the more likely he is to get married. And it's like, it poses questions, doesn't it? Are those same dating dynamics that we would have had thousands of years ago still the case today? Just danced and dressed up in a different way, dressed up in Instagram followers and fucking finance bro quarter zips and shit. Maybe, maybe it is. Um, I don't know. What do you think, Jake? What do you think?
I'm trying to comprehend what that means because, okay, I think the female perspective is pretty logical. It's like, I want the strongest man. I want like the pop smoke gangster guy that like is famous and is rich and is like a monster. He's a controlled monster
Yes.
and my controlled monster. Um, and but the male one, I'm I'm trying to understand what that means because does that mean that like that you want that men we're competing for like the chavvy girl in Luton and we're competing for the girl that's half Moroccan and half Spanish that lives in Dubai with a net worth of $1 million.
No, it's interesting. It's true. It's true. Okay, but I think this is gonna
But
right.
why
Let's say
were okay, go on.
Jake, hear me out. Right. This is I'm just playing with crazy hypotheticals, but fuck it. Let's say your name is Jacqueline, right? And you're a 30-year-old lady looking to meet someone to settle down with to have children, right? You're looking for like stability, right? And a man with decent character, um, and that really is indicator of like good quality genes and a good quality nurturing environment. Now, that is likely to be someone who is as competent or more competent than you in the social hierarchy, right? That could be, I don't know, a 35-year-old guy that's just like he's got his finances sorted, he's a good bloke, he's been through some stuff, whatever, whatever. Now, let's turn the tables and say that you're a 30-year-old guy looking to like settle down and have kids. Would you really want somebody that's like 35 but she's like really like she's really ingrained high up in the social hierarchy, like she's done really well in business or she's got loads of different like skills and stuff,
Like Lee level.
uh, or you have a 25-year-old girl who's like much healthier biologically just because she's younger and is more fertile by definition because she's younger. The guy to have kids and settle down, the social status, money, skill stuff doesn't matter as much as the health and fertility. That's why I think it comes back to evolutionary psychology, Jacob, because
Mm.
for a guy, good genes is youth. Yeah, like youth, fertility, health, or health and fertility, which youth is a proxy for, and a more like identifiable proxy. This is why older women want to look younger, generally speaking, and guys give less of a shit about that. For a woman looking at a guy, they want stability, and a stable, nurturing environment when the kid is born, but like signs of like the ability to acquire resources and the possession of resources. It's just it's different. I think it's different metrics, different hierarchies. I think. Does that make a bit like more
I,
sense?
what's making a lot of sense is I remember that there's podcasts are talking about this percent. There's this niche group of women that are really struggling. The women that are struggling the most are like 31 years old and they're really intelligent. They don't have a partner
Mm,
because they are like at the top of the hierarchy. So they want someone that's bigger than that.
mm-hmm.
And they're like, it's almost like in, if, if you're an intelligent guy, I feel like there's something in it in that you don't want your girl to be more intelligent than you. like,
You'd find it
like
difficult,
honestly, like I would rather be teaching like my girl and her being like, oh, that's so interesting, rather than me like learning from my girl. Like,
right?
I
I know what you're saying. Like that could be something the internet fucking rips into you for, Jake. But you know what? I think 80 to 90, maybe even more percentage of heterosexual males would agree with you. Why is that? So I think instead of shunning each other and being like, you're a dickhead, like, why is this a thing? And a thought that came to me when you were talking there is I remember hearing somewhere on a it was a podcast by, I've remembered it now. I can't remember his name, but it was another Modern Wisdom episode with a like attachment slash relationship neuroscientist. And it was about the like neurochemical and hormonal patterns that keep couples together. And one thing he said, which is very true, and I like it a lot, is that men and women want different things to keep a relationship going. Women want to be adored, and men want to be admired, and they're quite different. And it made a lot of sense, and maybe it points to what you're saying there. What when you say you adore something, I adore like I don't know, what do I adore? I love I don't know, I adore flowers. Looking at pretty flowers, I adore it. It's beautiful. It's it's fragile, it's vulnerable, but there's something beautiful and elegant in that, right? But I don't admire flowers, right? I admire um, some of the best like wheelchair basketball players in the world, but I don't adore them, right? I look up to them as like role models and like great figures in my life that I'd love to be like and be around. And maybe that's the difference. You want to be admired in a relationship, whereas maybe your future wife wants to be adored. I don't know. Like this doesn't apply to everyone. But it's just maybe that's a point you can make.
Mm. But then that kind of maybe what like how do you adore someone that's higher up than you in the social hierarchy for a man? Like, how do I how do I adore like the woman that's more intelligent than me? Because that would makes because that's what we're saying with how men don't care about the social hierarchy where we date. Like, generally, I think a reason that like I'm trying to think like it's weird how we it's weird how we want to date down because like I feel like we get a lot of enjoyment in sort of showing girls like our world and taking them to nice places and showing what we can do and trying to impress them and trying to adore them. Um, and I think like the phrase came to me like this is a man's world of like how being like doing all of this it's like we are the dominant one that's showing like the lady everything and we're like that we are that force generally like yeah
Let's maybe put it in a different way, right? So your point that this is a man's world, the way I see that is formal society is a masculine structure, or it feeds upon and promotes like masculine way of being, competition, like discipline, like grit, determination, and I'm not saying that, like, I hate that I have to caveat this all the time. Like, I'm not saying that women don't have those traits. Of course they do. God, there's some like powerhouse um females that have those skills in abundance. But I'm saying ultimately, would you agree, Jake, that the social hierarchy as like an abstract concept is a masculine structure?
Yeah.
Okay. So then if you have a female that rises up that social hierarchy in whatever means that is, monetarily, in some sort of like skill or whatever, are they then more masculine to you than a female who hasn't done that?
Yeah, like I look at
So
someone like
maybe,
I look at Leela Hormozy and I think, yeah, you're pretty masculine.
yes. Now, Layla Holmes, that's a good example, right? She's an attractive woman, right? But would I want to be with Layla? No, no, no. Like
But then it's Alex more above her in the hierarchy.
I don't know. You, I don't know the ins and outs of their relationship, but
I would
clearly
say
it
they're
works.
together. They're on the same. I'd say they're
Yeah,
together.
yeah, clearly it works. But what I'm saying is, I think maybe it goes back to, like, I always want to bring it back to taking the specifics of this, like, male, female out of it and looking at masculine and feminine energy. And if you're higher up in the social hierarchy, that's a masculine structure, so you're more likely to be masculine. And masculine men want femininity, right? If they're higher on the, thinking in David Data's terms here, from Way of the Superior Man, if you're higher in the masculine end of the spectrum, you are complementary to someone on the more feminine end of the spectrum, okay, which tends to maybe associate with lower position in the social hierarchy. But as they rise up, which is like fair play to them, they're more than like welcome to do that. That's the great thing about this modern world. They're going to rise up that structure, and maybe the guy at that point in the hierarchy with them then finds them less attractive, not because of the fact that they earn more money or they're high up in this company or whatever, but because in some way they adopted more masculine characteristics. I don't know.
I want to pose another question to you. So before we spoke in other podcasts about how the social hierarchy can be a bad thing because where are we? Where with our place in the social hierarchy, we're either more dominant than someone or we're more submissive than someone, and both have their
Well, let's
negative.
let's let's use superior and inferior in better terms.
Okay, superior and inferior. That's what I meant. Yeah, and I think there's weight to that. Uh, but I also think that is in our biology that we get a lot of joy out of it. And like, I guess I want to ask, like, generally speaking, do you think status is like a good thing that people should aim for? Because I like in the first glance, I see status as this capitalist guy that thinks he's better than everyone. But there's also different. There's loads. Status is very, very broad. It's like a hyper desire that we all want because you
Yeah.
get it from your intelligence, you get it from how many friends you have, you get it from being good at something. And I don't think all of that is bad. And I think that the fact that it gives us so much serotonin and it makes us feel good, especially in a male perspective, like I feel like there are some good things about status as well.
Okay, this is a fucking great question, Jake. And I've had many thoughts pinging around my head as you've been saying that. So I'm going to try and lie them out, lay them out in a clear, articulated way. I think the answer all depends on the extent that you're possessed by your ego. Because let's say if I'm completely like hung up on the idea of Joel Clifton in the social hierarchy, right? And all my emotions are like tied to where he is in that hierarchy, i.e., what other people think of him, then my emotions are going to get swayed in all kinds of places, whether I'm inferior or superior to another person. If I'm inferior, I'm going to feel insecure, low self esteem, unconfident. That's not good. That's depression. That's anxiety. Those emotions, those mental states are there to show us that we're lower in the social hierarchy than we'd like to be, right? But in the other case, if I'm superior to someone, then I can become arrogant, ignorant, um, just spiteful and horrible to be around, too ego possessed, and then you become blind, and then the world just slaps you down when you weren't looking. But there is a place you can get to where there isn't possession by the ego, and you build competence in the hierarchy, but you don't use it as a weapon against others. It makes me think about in Peterson's biblical lectures, he talked about this line in the Bible where it said, "The meek shall inherit the earth." And meek, to us, I think, in layman's society, in layman's terms, meek sounds like kind of weak, wimpy, like a little bit afraid, a little bit sort of lack of backbone. And Peterson was like, no, 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 that can't be it. So he looked into like the deep rooted etymology of that word and perhaps what the author was trying to communicate with that word. And he said it was something along the lines of uh, a, having a great weapon and keeping it sheathed, having a great sword but keeping it sheathed, right? That's what meek meant, really, in that. So the meek will inherit the earth really means the person who has the power and the mighty sword but keeps it sheathed will inherit the earth. And that, to me, I think of all the people that have great competence and great status in the hierarchy, but they don't use it to feed their ego. They instead use it for the betterment of themselves and others and their loved ones and the wider community. That's the difference of, like, I don't know, if I'm, and I just have to put it in my own real world terms so it makes sense. If I'm playing in a scrimmage and I know that I'm the best player there, right? If I wanted to use that superiority and just like drive people 1v1 and make layups, what am I getting out of that? I'm just feeding my ego, and everyone around me is just getting like crushed by that. And there's just no point. It's just a terrible, toxic environment. But instead, if I use it as an opportunity to help people develop areas of their game, that's having the sword but keeping it sheathed. Like that's right. I am rising. I am one of the highest in the social hierarchy in that environment, but I'm not inflicting like that on others in a painful way. Does that make sense?
That's such a good answer. And I think I've got a similar answer, but from a very different context. Um, Generally, I also wanted to add that I think status is important because it's a big part of who we choose to spend our time with. Maybe, like
Yeah.
I want to hang with men that are also high status, that are also very good at something, that are also on the same kind of wavelength, if not above me. So the answer that I came to was very inspired by this. It was I was listening to an Alan Watts lecture, and Alan Watts was telling a story about the last time that he met Carl Jung. And so they're both in Carl Jung's house, and they're sort of walking about. He's got this really nice house, and he's looking into the lake. And they were talking about swans, and Alan Watts says, "Is it true that swans are monogamous?" And then Jung says, "Oh yes, that's a funny thing about their mating. For the first time, um, it begins where they're like competing over women, and they're basically fighting. The swans all fight until they discover what they're supposed to be doing, and then and then Young says, "This the swans have been great for the swans have been great for helping out some of my female homosexual patients." And I think this um yeah, then Alan Watts says some other things in his lecture when he's like, I was very impressed by what Young said, by his sort of his warmth and his fun, and but also the intelligence of what he was saying. And essentially, what that means is we're all competing like the swans for status until we settle, and then we realize what really matters.
Mm.
So it's almost like as men, we're all competing to get the financial, the kind of the comfortable, the we're trying to get the girl, we're trying to get the house, and we're trying to get comfortable and develop as resourceful and competent men. Once we've got that, then we kind of settle and we're fine with it. And we then focus on just our relationships and living the good lifestyle and improving, like, especially when we have kids as well. When we've got family, do we really care about status? I don't think so. I think we are still that person. We still have that level of like competence or whatever it is, or intelligence or whatever it is, but our priorities are different. And so I think when you say the meek shall inherit the earth and the kind of what was it, the sword and the sheath, it's like we are still that person, but we're not acting it out anymore. We're on
Mm.
to better things with it. So,
Yeah, maybe it comes back to Jung's analogy of the two phases of life and the cycle of the sun during the day. So when you're in the morning of life and you feel like you need to validate your ego in the world, status matters. Getting good at stuff in the world, competing, beating other people matters, because if you're ahead of others, then you're going to get the best job, and or you're going to have the best lifestyle, and you're going to meet a great girl, and you're going to settle down and have kids or whatever, whatever. But then the afternoon of life is almost an unwiring of all of that, realizing that that chase was not what it seemed, and your ego is no longer what you should feed. You should feed a sense of inner being, and cultivate a deeper meaning for life and a deeper part of yourself. Very true. I think it'll be so much easier to not get competitive, I think, when I'm like in my granddad era, because what's the point? Like, I was saying to my friend the other day, I don't know if you'll agree with this, like you'll agree with me on this, Jake, because maybe we're shows us a difference in our temperament, but I long for the days where my fighting in life is over. I long for the days where, like, I'm financially secure, I've got children that maybe are older and they've got grandchildren, and I can just spend my days listening to the birds, reading, writing, sipping coffee, making food, spending time with my wife, enjoying the garden. I long for those days because it's almost like it's a fuck you to the world. You are like the way my granddad lives. It's just like it's peaceful peace.
yeah, when you complete the game and you're just like fulfilled for the last 20 years of your life.
It's like in Pokemon where you beat the final four and like the final guy, whatever his name is, and then your Pokemon are all like level 40, but they can go up to level 100, and then it unlocks a whole nother area of the map. I don't know if you played like Pokemon as a kid on the Nintendo, but it is like that.
Mm, yeah, I think I feel that maybe less to a degree than you do, but I do. I understand where you're coming from. Um, okay, tell me about your like first big point.
I love that we've gone 52 minutes before we got into like the first written down point, but no, those were good questions, Jake. So I guess I've made some like quite a lot of notes on this, but I don't know if I'm really going to use them. I'm just going to sort of go off the top of my head and what's been relevant at the moment. But basically, I've been looking at this idea of, or this demographic of the spiritual but not religious, right, which is on the rise in sort of from the beginning of the 21st century. And it's what I'm going to do my dissertation on at university this year. So maybe throughout our conversations across the next academic year, I'm going to bring this up more and more and detail more bits about what I've learned. But I find this interesting because how it's almost like this is a group of people who reject religion but still want a relationship with God, right? So, firstly, I guess let's break down what is the nature of this demographic. Okay, it's, Nietzsche said that we killed God, whenever that was, when we had this sort of Renaissance and scientific understanding came through, and we started to see the world objectively. He said we killed God, but I don't think we did kill God, because who the hell are we to kill God? We're small little human egos. We're like ants, roll like scurrying around the world. I just think we killed slash distrusted the avenues with which most people were introduced to God. And that's a very different thing. God is very much still alive. And when I say God, I see God as a meta term. God to me is an aggregate of all terms like fate and like faith and like trusting the universe and things like manifestation, and everything happens for a reason, and universal love and the life force that makes trees grow and 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 makes, and it drives animals' instincts, and whatever created this earth, whatever wired our biology, whatever made everything become what it is, that to me is God, right? It's not a guy wearing sandals in the sky. And that God is very much alive. And I think that's why this spiritual but not religious category arises, because we don't trust religion anymore. We've learned too much about the corruption. We've
Mm,
learned too much about um, the specifics that create human conflict, the egos that get identified with the religious doctrines, and how that muddies the water and makes it about me versus you and your different practices. But the underlying thing that religions tried to translate all those thousands of years ago by those prophets, that metaphysical, immeasurable, beautiful, complex force that's going on around us, that is real. And I think the spiritual but not religious types are those who know that there's something more going on, but don't trust those avenues that we usually introduce to him by. And so they have to find their own individual way or alternative ways. And then I came across two terms that I think you'll really like, Jake. And it was this idea of vertical transcendence and horizontal transcendence. And I think the spiritual but not religious types fit perfectly in this horizontal transcendence idea. So vertical transcendence is imagining like a universal hierarchy, and at the top of that hierarchy is God, right? Whatever that means to you. And in vertical transcendence, you worship up, right? You worship towards that all-knowing, all-powerful being that is God, right? And that is the center of your spiritual practices through prayer, through whatever. Whereas horizontal transcendence is an unhierarchical view of like universal power. It sees God as something that's in me, something that's in you, to do with the interconnectedness of everything. We're not worshiping up, we're almost worshiping around, right? Seeing the divinity that is in everything, in the trees around us, in the birds, in the people, in our relationships, in ourself, right? Getting to know ourself. And that to me is what what spirituality focuses on. Religion is a very vertical transcendent structure, whereas spirituality is a very horizontal transcendent structure. And then I'll finish with this. How then do I think how do we worship in the process of horizontal transcendence? Because vertical transcendence, you can look at any religion to kind of figure that out: Islam, Christianity, whatever. It's the reading scripture, it's prayer, it's engaging with the community, it's the sacraments, etc. But horizontal transcendence, how do you worship that? And I think it's about living life as consciously as you possibly can. Like really noticing the interconnectedness, the beauty, the nuance, the covert divinity in all the things around us. And I think it's similar to what I talked about a couple of weeks ago, Jung's idea of true consciousness, a true state of consciousness, the purest state of consciousness where everything just opens up around you and you see God in all things. God being the universal power, the great creator of it all. And I think that's the kind of spiritual path that I know I'm definitely on, that many of my friends that sit on this fence about they don't trust religion, but they know there's something more, that's the kind of path that they're on. And I think it's probably the path that you're on too.
Yeah.
And then I laughed to myself, Jake, the other day, because I've been spending a lot of time during my injury sitting and thinking about things. And I realized we wanted to start a podcast about psychology and philosophy. But what do we talk about the most? God. Now, we came into this, we're not religious guys. I've never been to a church service that isn't a funeral, right? But we seem to sit down every week and somehow we're talking about higher beings, universal power, whether that comes from psychedelics or psychology or philosophy. We're just talking about God in my terms. And I just find it funny that we didn't mean to do that. It just kind of happened by accident. And I think it's our own way of finding our unique faith as time goes by.
Mm, yeah, that's confused me a bit. Like, why is it came about?
We didn't choose it, did we? We didn't sit down
No,
going, talk about religion. Ever, ever.
but I
I,
guess,
you knew I studied psychology and you were curious. That was where we started.
but when you, I guess, keep looking deeper, God is just the thing that you come to. Like, you just arrive at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think I'll solidify some of these points first. So I think, first of all, me and you, I think we are on that spiritual but not religious. I think that's a good way to class ourselves. And that's because I think trying to kind of like understand the two. I think with the spiritual, not religious, there's horizontal kind of worship, and that is because like it's like almost a perspective of the law of one and how like all of this kind of is connected, and there's some kind of like everything we do does matter, and it's all like a transfer of energy, and you kind of I get these kind of hippie vibe type of connotations, but it's not like we're constantly praying to the creator, and that's why it's not a vertical worship.
Mm.
And I mean, is that okay? I mean, like I think we're kind of spreading ourselves out, and we're taking up different ideas. I think a lot of people do take up ideas from different religions, but you don't kind of stay and commit to one and think like everything you do is affects um this this vertical God. I think you're pretty right in that distinction. That's what I'm trying to. I think that's what I understand from it so far. And I also think your point in how Gen Z is kind of fed up with the corruption of religion is completely true. That's a great point. I think we are. I think we see stuff online about how rich the church is and other things that go on, and there's too much for us to forgive and get past. So I think this horizontal spiritual category is the future, maybe, or it's going to keep increasing. And I think a lot of people are like that and they don't admit it, or maybe they don't know it. Or there's just a lot of people that are atheists and nothing will happen. But I
I
think those are my starting thoughts.
I think I was talking to my mum about this the other day. This same point because I was talking to her about my dissertation and what I was reading and stuff. There is a hole in this modern day, and this is why I'm excited, Jake. Because I'm like, fuck, is this what my life's work is going to be about? Like, is this what I'm going to write and speak about as time goes on? Because we can't kill God. We can't do that. We're human beings. We can't kill the idea of something more. We can't kill spirituality. We can't kill the metaphysical because it has a tangible impact on our life, right? Meaning, purpose, universal love, they are all abstract metaphysical things that do affect us. Now, if you want to, you can go proper objective and Richard Dawkinsify it and think about biology and brain chemistry and love's just a chemical reaction and row. I don't care. I don't believe that. That doesn't fit into my philosophy of life. We'll just have to agree to disagree there. God is something that is real and we need it, but we don't trust religion, rightly so, right? So we need something to fill the gap. We need a way of connecting to that. And I hate using the word God, I guess, because it's almost super linked to religion. But we need a way to connect with that higher meaning. Because what my mum called it the other day, she called it materialistic nihilism. This position we're in now, where we've killed God. So what do we have to care about? The clothes we wear, the car we drive, the house we have, the amount of fucking digits we have on our bank account. But that's not really filling the hole. That's just this like capitalist fueling disease, mental epidemic that we're all possessed by. But it's not, that's why people are so fucking depressed and hate their lives. Because even if they win the materialistic nihilism game, you're still not connected to nature, to what's really going on, to the source of where we all come from. We need something in the middle. And I think a large thing that's going to fill that hole is psychology, philosophy, and mythology. We need to go back to understand like what makes humans feel the most alive. Because the more I've like gone into psychology, philosophy, and particularly as I'm coming into mythology now and starting to read Joseph Campbell's work and a lot more Jung, I realized that these were the answers I was looking for. Like
Uh,
the universal stories of man and what it means to be a good human being. That's 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 what we need. We need more people to understand things like the hero's journey. We need more people to understand that their behavior does have consequences to the way they feel, to the way they impact others. And I think religion has just it's just burnt out. It's just exhausted its fuel in actually convincing people. And something else needs to step in.
I think your point of the death of God and how the question of like why am I here? Maybe that won't have the same structured, like logical, well not logical, but like told to us answer that religion
Yeah,
gives.
yeah,
That question's still going to be there, and it would just metamorphosize. It would just change shape, and we'll answer it in different ways.
yeah.
And that way, it's going to be more personal. It's going to be more spiritual.
So what I was saying to mum was, which is so true, is like, okay, we all need answers to those questions. The big questions, why am I here? What am I doing? We all need an answer to those. It's almost like it's like the same reason the body needs salt and electrolytes and glucose. It's the same thing, right? Our psychology, our psyche, our soul needs answers to those questions. What's it all for? But we don't trust religions, and we also don't trust like the world we live in now. That's why you see young people, people mine in your age, talking about dopamine detoxes and how to stop doom scrolling. And I see so many articles about like people saying that AI art will never be the same as true art. We know that we need to return back to something that connects us all. We need to come back to some sort of spiritual path. We need answers to those questions. And what's hard is now that we distrust religion, it's kind of lost its role because perhaps what religion was is like a mass giver of those answers to those questions. Who are you? Why are you here? You're here to follow the words of Christ or Muhammad or Allah or whatever, or you're here to follow the path of the Buddha or you know, whatever religion you want to choose. They gave us those answers, and because we distrust them, we have to figure out those answers by ourselves. I mean, I guess that's exactly what Nietzsche talked about in finding your own values. Um,
Yeah. I, I'm trying to think of someone that's like, as your mum said, like materialistically nihilistic. And do they not think to themselves, like, isn't a better thing to aim for the question of, am I a good person? Why am I here? Over, like, that pursuit over the materialistic thing. Why don't they think that?
because if you start thinking about that, Jake, what if the answer is, oh fuck, I'm not a good person? That's painful. That's painful.
Mm. Fuck.
For you to for you to start on the up, you have to really come to terms with where you are now. I think that might
Yeah,
like it takes courage, mate. The going that's the hero's journey. That's thrusting yourself into the unknown. Because if you're like, fuck, I'm not as good of a person as I could be, and everyone should think that unless they're like, I don't know, like the king of the world. Um, and that question is like when you realize that, that's when you're thrust into the unknown. Because how do you know how to be a good person? You got to just figure it out.
but
Start doing like more things that are right. Go on.
that's the cool thing about the journey, though. Like the figuring out. Um, I also wanted to add like how there's another perspective on the advantage that these spiritual pursuits give us is kind of a unity or a deeper connection with each other.
Sorry, just my camera just fell off the table. Carry on.
Okay, you're still listening. So the alternative, if you are a material nihilist, is well, is disunity, uh, because you're sort of getting those things to compete with each other. You're getting those positions to compete, and so there's kind of like I think it's a fractionation of your goals, because like you're you're just anxious from like the conflict of the competing, and you're less motivated to move forward, and so you just kind of spread yourself with materialism. And when Nietzsche announced the death of God, he said something would take its place, and that thing was communism. And he rightfully predicted it, because if you think about it, communism is kind of a religion replacer, and that unites people. And
Yeah,
uh,
that's why he was so smart because he predicted that like mass identification with political ideology, and you saw that in Nazi Germany, you saw that in the Soviet Union, which was only what 50 to 100 years after he wrote about the death of God.
but this nihilism, like it works if there's less religious people, because if there's more division, then there's more pain, and the more pain, the more products can be sold. So
Uh-huh.
it's a absolute spiral. And yes, there will be more people that wake up to this spiritual reality, but also more people that fall under it, I think.
Mate, if you're spiritually in a good place, you don't need things. Like genuinely, I don't spend money on things. I spend money on food, petrol, like books and rent.
And a violinist.
And yeah, and like things like that, right? Going to concerts. Yeah, yeah, 100%. But that's again, that's a soul enlivening thing. I like bought some clothes today because I got some birthday money. I bought like one jumper and that was enough. Like I just it doesn't do anything for me. It and I think that's you're so right in that. The more people that feel like their life is meaningless, the more that materialistic nihilism will feed off them because they're trying to fill that hole. But material things, just go into that hole and get lost in the abyss. Like the only thing that's going to fill that abyss is some overarching meaning for life. And that only comes from understanding yourself and why you're here and what's going on. And that's an individual journey. And it's a spiritual journey as much as those terms have so much stigma around them.
Um, I'm just gonna message my friend real quick, so I'm supposed to be going to gym with him, but I've got on to add a bit more to when what you said about mythology.
You're supposed to be going now.
Nah, in a bit. I say running over a bit. We'll let you know when I leave. Let's see. Well, um, is it cool? Um, so I've been I watched. This is inspired by a very good podcast episode, and I think he's called Yuvak Noah Harry.
Yes, the
Um,
guy that wrote Sapiens.
yeah, and he was on Lex, and it was a very good podcast. Like a little while ago, but he essentially because you were saying about how like the significance of what you're reading right now and Joseph Campbell and Young about sort of mythology and the stories, and I've been thinking about like the significance of the intangible of the story. So firstly, like I this started from I asked the question of can something be true without evidence, and actually like a quite an academic answer, and I didn't quite understand it, but for anyone that's studying sort of that knows their stuff about physics, he and maths, he basically there's a guy called like Gödel's, and it's called the completeness theorem, and he basically proves how something can be true mathematically without evidence. But I can't quite understand that. I'm not smart enough to explain it. But that question, I first thought like, well, yes, like before we had before telescopes were invented, like people knew still about like other planets and stuff like that without actually like seeing them. So you can understand that question in the surface of it, which is before something is discovered, it's still happening. Then if I go deeper, and what he was saying is how money is like a story that you've been told. You can't eat money, but you can exchange it for some almonds that you can eat. And the almonds is just a story that we've been told that it came from Argentina and it's got magnesium and vitamin E in it and it's going to make us healthy. And then the question is, well, when does a story, if these things are like concepts and things that we didn't know before, the question is, when does fiction become acceptable reality?
Mm.
And well, the answer to that is, well, stories are created because they have a purpose and stories are created because they have the ability to communicate truth in a way that is either they're able to communicate truth in a way that is painless and simple, whereas normally truth is complicated and it's blunt and it's painful because for example like you don't want to hear bluntly that your desires are killing you, but when you hear it indirectly through the story of like mythological creatures called sirens, used to eat
Mm.
healers through sex appeal. it tells the same thing, but it resonates better. And also, you don't want to understand like the you don't have you're not smart enough, maybe the average person, to understand why aeroplanes work and why they can take flight using mechanics and aeronautics and thermofluids and how they all come together to make your experience safe. But you hear the story of the Wright brothers, and like that's good enough for you.
Mm.
And so the story is also maybe the most like powerful and tangible of all, because like the Nazis told a story that turned people into killers.
Yes.
And so the story is this like it's like a living organism, and stories like they use us for their purposes.
Hmm.
And to conclude, like as Young said, people don't have ideas, ideas are people.
I was literally just about to say that, bro.
It's like but think about that. Stories don't it's not like that they use us like they do.
Hmm.
Like it's like yes, we live through stories that we tell ourselves, but it's like us telling ourselves it, or is the story going on to us? And I
Yeah.
think it's going on to us.
Mm. It possesses us like a puppeteer, you know. Um, yeah, so good, so good. I mean, I think again it comes back to this difference between the world of facts and the world of values, or the world of the left hemisphere and the world of the right hemisphere. If you're told a set of like objective facts about reality, that's not like engaging, as true as they may be. It's not engaging. It doesn't really resonate. It doesn't really. You can't apply that to your life. It's not applicable. It doesn't make sense in your gut and your heart. Whereas you tell a story that has the same moral message or has the same information as the set of bullet points, and it just touches something. It just tickles the human soul, and it's so much easier to understand it. Um, and I think we understand our life as stories. Like we are a character, and this is the plot, and this is how the plot developed, and this is the disasters that happened, and this is the victories that happened. We don't see our life as a set of bullet points. Like it's just maybe we are. Maybe that's the best way to think about a human being. We are the physical manifestation of the stories we tell ourselves, or the stories we're told, or the stories that are imprinted on us, or the stories that possess us. Um, and I think it's part of the great reason that our species got where it is today. As soon as we could tell each other stories about what life was about and what was important, everything.
Mm. I mean, it's kind of hard, right? Because yeah, we're like a collective of the stories of our life, which is a story, but we're the ones that add the significance to the story. It's through the lens of our own perception, and so our failures and victories are just relative to society's stories,
Hmm.
and so we have to be really careful about it. And it's weird how there's like themes in life, and we've really nailed this point before, but how like David and Goliath is the story, but the same story is appears in Creed, or it with the
Hmm.
boxing film, or it I don't know. There's loads of different what.
Harry Potter versus Voldemort,
Yeah, like a little kid versus what, like an alien, an alien.
like crazy wizard, snake geezer. You know what I mean?
It's the same thing. It just translates into something different, and so these are like the rules of the universe. Are the stories that keep coming up,
Yeah.
but under that is truth, and I think it's yeah, it's up to the individual and where we apply the truth through the story. Um, so yeah, I was listening to that from. I really like Yuval Noah Harari. Like there's no one else like him on the planet, and he thinks in a way that like he has like a weird niche of stuff that come together. It was a really good podcast.
I bet I might save that to listen to on a long drive at some point.
Did you want to tell the man who had 1,000 faces?
Yeah. So I'm reading Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces. So good, so good. Oh my god. I mean, I'm only like 60 pages in, but it basically goes through each like very like fine detail of the hero's journey myth, and then uses multiple examples throughout history. So like the most recent bit I was reading was about the call to adventure, and the example they used was the story of the Buddha, and how like the Buddha had all the riches and all the comforts. He was a prince, I want to say, um, and he lived in this great palace, but he had something that made him want to go out into the real world. And then he saw, like a sick man, an old man, a dead man, and a poor man, or something like that, um, and realized there was suffering in the world, and that was the call to adventure. Was there suffering? What do I do about this? And then he went into the unknown. He left the palace. He went through great spiritual trials and tribulations, and then he ended up reaching ultimate enlightenment when he meditated for however many days under the under whatever. What tree was it? Some kind of it's written down in the book anyway. Meditated for that many days and nights, and reached peak enlightenment, and then returned back and became the figurehead of the new religion. Right, he was a prophet. That's the same. That's the hero's journey outlined. And there was stuff about the refusal of the call to adventure, talking about people who deny it when it comes to them, and how their life just goes downhill and downhill from there. And Campbell made this amazing point about saying, like, if you ignore the things that come across you in your path that are trying to lure you down a certain direction, you're denying God's will, right? And you are then becoming your God in your life, making your own decisions about exactly what your life is about and what it's, how it's going to go. But then he said, how boring will that be, knowing exactly what's going to happen? How boring would it be to just follow what your ego thinks it wants, rather than following the things that call to you along your path? Like, so good. I think as the weeks go by and I read more, I'll bring more sort of articulated points across to these episodes. But I guess I'll leave it here with an overall thing at the beginning, where he talked about the universality of this story, and how it has three stages: the departure from the known world, the initiation in the unknown, and the return to the known world. And that three-part structure, that's in every single story uh, about human being, and the coming of age story of a human being. And your life is one big story that of that narrative. You depart from wherever we come from here, and when you're born into this world and you're initiated, you know nothing. You're an innocent, vulnerable baby, and you have to figure out those questions of who am I and what am I supposed to do. And you go through initiation in the world. You take on the challenges of establishing yourself, of finding something to do, some sort of career, meeting somebody, falling in love, having children, keeping connections with your friends and family, exploring a bit of the world, giving back to the community. And then you return, you die, and you return back to where you came from. And if that's nothing, that's nothing. But your life is one big hero's journey. But within that, there are smaller versions. Each year, each 18 months, you should be somehow being challenged and pushed into that unknown, departing from what you currently know, being initiated in the unknown, and returning with new wisdom. It's so good, man. It's so good. It's one of those books I reckon I could read 3 or 4 times and gain something more each time.
I'm trying to think though. I feel like I really departed from my hero's journey around sort of 17, 18 when we started the podcast and I started to start businesses. But I'm trying to think about normal people, about maybe how they do they just like have opportunities and don't depart? Like, you
Because of
reckon?
fear. Because of fear. Let me take the books actually in the structure of books I've got underneath my MacBook. Let me try and take this out without like fucking my camera flying across the room again. Hold on. Let me read you this bit that he wrote about the refusal of the call to adventure, which I think is what you're talking about here. Supernatural aid. So oft I'll just read the paragraph. And you can let me know what you think of this. Often in actual life, and not infrequently in the myths and popular tales, we encounter the dull case of the call unanswered, for it is always possible to turn the ear to other interests. Refusal of the summons converts the adventure into its negative. Walled in boredom, hard work, or culture, the subject loses the power of significant affirmative action and becomes a victim to be saved. His flowering world becomes a wasteland of dry stones, and his life feels meaningless, even though, like King Minos, He may, through titanic effort, succeed in building an empire of renown. Whatever house he builds, it will be a house of death, a labyrinth of cyclopean walls to hide him from his minotaur. All he can do is create new problems for himself and await the gradual approach of his disintegration. So good. And then he puts here, this is for people who refuse the call. The future is regarded not in terms of an unremitting series of deaths and rebirths, but as though one's present system of ideals, virtues, goals, and advantages were to be fixed and made secure. If one is oneself's own God, then God himself, the will of God, the power that would destroy one's egocentric system, becomes a monster.
Mm.
It's basically saying there, if you refuse the call and think you know what's right for you, rather than fate, for example, then whatever you do, even if it's successful, it won't be joyful. It will feel like a trap. It will be a constant like hamster in a hamster wheel, just going round and round and round, and it will just feel meaningless. So good.
What was the king sort of Minos and the Minotaur bit like?
That's based on a myth. I'm not actually sure. He hasn't gone into that properly. I think he's just making a brief allusion to that. But I want to say, you know the story of the labyrinth, where there's like a monster in the labyrinth, and you have to try and get out. You go in there for something valuable, and you fight the monster, and then come back. It's basically like that. It's like if your path isn't like if you refuse the adventure, then your life will just become this labyrinth that you're just searching for that answer all the time, and you're just stuck hiding from the Minotaur that really needs to be fought. Do you know what I mean?
Bro, that scene in Harry Potter with the labyrinth is so good. I just got that thought again.
Oh, good. And the labyrinth, that's an archetypal image. Going into somewhere, there's many twists and turns. There's like uncertain danger and possibility of death. But somewhere in the middle of the maze, in the center, in the middle of the target, there's something valuable. That's an archetypal image. That makes sense to all of us.
Do you think like we're like a human in the maze, but somewhere there's a monster, and we're trying to find whatever's in the middle of it?
Yeah. And that's life. You're thrust into the labyrinth. You have to figure out how to get out, or how to find the reward, or how to keep away from the monster. Like it's just, I don't know, man. My brain's getting pretty tired because we've done an hour and a half. But this is good shit.
No, I gotta like rewatch that Harry Potter shit. Like I just remember that a massive like thought just came up about like how everyone's cheering him on as he goes into those like games, but then he
Yes,
goes that hedge, and then like it's just dark, it's pure darkness, and
yes,
the maze is trying to kill him, and like he's competing, he's trying to find whatever like trophy it is or whatever, and then the whole Voldemort thing comes about. And the other people when they're competing and they get hurt, and it's God, that's peak Harry Potter for me.
mate. Every time I read this book, well, every time I read about mythology and the hero's journey, the biggest example that always comes to me is Harry Potter. I'd love to know if J.K. Rowling like purposefully structured things that way, because there's a chapter talking about the supernatural aid that like aids the hero on the call to adventure, and it just does sound like characters from Harry Potter, like Hagrid or Dumbledore, or the things they did for him across those narratives. Like it's very 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 close to like it is an exact reenactment of the hero's journey, just in a modern way, and I think that's why it resonated with people so much. That's why it's so popular. Anyway, I think we should close
Yeah.
up. It's been a
How
good
does
night.
Rogan do like 3 hours of these? Like,
I don't know, bro. A lot of caffeine.
okay. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I didn't even get through all of my points, but I think this is the right place to stop, and I think we've done well here. So yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. If you guys can keep spamming the sort of Spotify reviews if you haven't already, that'd be amazing. We're trying to get to 100 5-star, well, just 100 reviews in general. Slowly creeping up. So thank you for everyone so far. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time.